my leg.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me. I haven't shared my story in over a year, so it feels kind of exciting to dig back in and see what else has come up. So I'm Jennifer, I'm an alcoholic. According to my day count, I have 1,932 days sober. I got sober on December 5th, 2019. So 5 years and a few months, you can do the math. Um, so I am originally from New York. I was born in New Jersey, but raised in New York State. Um, the middle daughter of three daughters, and I was born on Christmas Eve in 1969. So, um, Christmas Eve baby, middle daughter, recipe for um, lots of victim mentality, lots of woe is me, pity potty. Um, Personality traits. Um, and I used to start my story by saying that I was pretty sure that I was born with a biological predisposition for depression and addictive tendencies. And then a few years ago, I actually got some genetic testing under the supervision of a psychiatrist, and and I did discover that I have a short serotonin transporter gene. I always get the terminology wrong, but the point is, I was born with a genetic predisposition to experience depression if I encountered stressful life circumstances. And I was born into a family with an active alcoholic father and an untreated adult child of an alcoholic mother. And I always very much identified with my father. It was always kind of clear that my father and I were like two peas in a pod. And my mother is a very, well, I, I always, I've decided, or I believe that she has narcissistic personality disorder tendencies and maybe some um, borderline tendencies. So without formally diagnosing her, she displayed a lot of tendencies that made me afraid of her as a young child. And well, mostly my emotional memories of childhood were just of being afraid of everything, afraid of people, afraid of failure, afraid of my parents, afraid of my mother, her anger. She was angry a lot. So I learned early in life to just kind of um, be not seen, hide in a corner, not attract attention, and be a rule follower. I am a very strict rule follower. And I learned early on to just always know the rules so I could always kind of explain and justify and lawyer my way out of any trouble that I got into. So I was always and then I kind of became a goody goody and I was very shy. So I was afraid and shy and a rule follower and um, kind of invisible and just really, really lonely. And one time I heard in a share something that just really connected with me. And it was a woman said that she always felt like she was a car with the wheels out of alignment. And I feel like that it's like I could see what other people were doing and I could observe their patterns, but I just never really understood what I was supposed to be doing or why I was even here. I had a lot of just kind of like feeling overwhelmed by the fact that I existed and that I had to kind of get up and do life and leave the house and go to kindergarten. I mean, I was one of those kids who cried in kindergarten. So I was just overwhelmed by everything. So in childhood, I wasn't popular, didn't have friends, um, became a ballet dancer. And I think that that was kind of a good environment for me because I think if I hadn't ha I needed a hobby that took a lot of time and that required a lot of self-discipline and that would allow a lot of self-loathing, but it would be normative. So I think if I hadn't done ballet, I would have ended up doing a lot more self-harm. But ballet also allowed me to do a lot of restricted eating. So for years, I denied myself calories. I was very much because I was depressed, I didn't feel joy, but I felt a lot of fear. Like, so I was always very afraid of negative consequences, but I wasn't always drawn to the possibility of joyful outcomes. So it was just kind of like I would go along with things, even dance, which I was competent at it, but not great at it. But it was like I didn't love it. I just did it because I needed something to do so I could hate myself and judge myself and be critical of myself and be a perfectionist. And I stuck with ballet for a long time, did a lot of damage to my body. Um, Still to this day have body image issues. Uh, and was a very, so high school and was, I was very nerdy and bookish and I didn't have dates. I didn't have a lot of invitations. And I didn't start drinking early either. I just was kind of too much of a terrified rule follower. I was a very much a goody goody again, even through high school. Um, I did start to have some friends and I did have a boyfriend in high school. And I was always, because I was very anxious, I was always drawn to people who would kind of didn't really didn't give me the time of day. Like I was always kind of clingy and clutchy, and then people just kind of tolerated me. But so my boyfriend was kind of an asshole, and he wasn't terribly abusive, but he didn't really care much about me. And when he dumped me, I think I had my first panic attack. That was an epiphany I had lately or recently, I should say. Sorry, it's 1:20 where I am. It's in the middle of the night. I'm in the East Coast, Eastern Standard Time. Yeah, EST. Anyway, so when he dumped me, I became unconsolable and I fell onto the floor of the car. It was in a car. He was trying to drop me off at the end of a date and also drop me out of his life. And I fell to the floor of the car and I was hyperventilating and sobbing and I couldn't talk. And he ended up having to drive me to like this park a quarter of a mile from my parents' house so he could kind of leave me there I mean I wanted to be left. I didn't want to be in the car with him, but so like I had this really strong visceral body reaction to rejection from my first boyfriend. And that's kind of what my relationships were like for most of my young adulthood, which is terrible, awful pairings that should never have happened. I had a girlfriend once who we were together for 4 years and I discovered she had been having sex for the last 18 months of our relationship with multiple people. So like I was not drawn to people who were safe or who I even knew. I just kind of lomped onto people, like latched onto people who would tolerate me, I think. Um, so let's see. College. I went to college. I was very competitive. Again, always very driven to succeed. Not driven out of passion or interest in anything, but just driven out of fear of failure. Um, I am now a professor. I think it's not a surprise that I never left college because the one thing I always could do was be a good student. I knew what teachers wanted. I knew what to give them. And so in grad school, not even in college, I still was hanging out with all the goody goodies in college. And so I didn't really do a lot of drinking or drugs. But in grad school, that's when I finally started to kind of let loose. And I remember feeling something like I remember the bliss of being like I would drink beer and then I would smoke some pot and then I would smoke some cigarettes and then I would eat some chocolate and it was like this like it was just like I felt like I had been the bliss I got from like indulging in things that like finally I was allowed to be bad and I became a very heavy drinker in a short period of time. Um I mean it was not that short. It got worse and worse. And I think it was probably in my mid 30s when I started to drink to the point of passing out on a daily basis. But I guess, whatever. That's pretty extreme. So um in grad school, I did start to drink a lot and mix it with drugs and cigarettes and just kind of be out of control. That's kind of when I started to drive when I shouldn't be driving, when I was tipsy. Um, I mean, it was still just uh, desire to escape, um, or just, I don't know. I guess I don't even, some people talk about how happy they feel from being drunk. I feel like it was more like the bliss of being allowed to drink, or the bliss of letting myself kind of engage in something to indulgence that was so counter to my personality that made me feel very powerful. So drinking, like I even started to kind of feel proud of myself for being such a drinker, because I was like, no, nobody would have, nobody in my high school would have ever imagined that I would be somebody who was became such a partier. And it made me feel a little bit cool or proud, like in a way that I never had as a teenager or child. Um, so uh, so I finished grad school. Again, I was always a workaholic. I guess grad school also is where my workaholic tendencies really took hold. And to this day, that's something that I still struggle with. I really do cope by just getting lost in work, and not even work that's important, just kind of meaningless work. But anyway, so I met my husband when I was 29, in when I was in grad school. He followed me from one job to the next, and now by I was a full professor by 40, by the age of 40, but a very heavy drinker. Um, by the time I was in my late 30s, I was drinking a at least a full bottle of wine by myself every night, and quote unquote, falling asleep on the couch, um, not finishing the ends of movies, um, starting to bump into things. I stubbed my toes so many times that some of my pinky toes are just kind of permanently damaged. Like I just started kind of being sloppy and puffy and hot. I always felt hot, like my skin, I was too tight for my skin. When I look at pictures of myself from my late 30s to mid 40s, um, I just looked like I don't know, like I was uncomfortable in my body. Um, and my husband sometimes would take pictures of me passed out on the couch, because I think it freaked him out, but he's still too much of a people pleaser to ever, I hope he doesn't listen to this podcast, but he's too much of a pleaser to ever have called me out on it. But he would take pictures of me and then show me the next day, and I'd be like, I would look like a corpse lying there passed out on the couch, and I'd be like, oh, why did you do that? He's like, oh, I just wanted you to see. Um, so so I guess I feel like I'm fast forwarding, but I also don't want to speak for too long. So, what drove me to AA? By the time I came to AA, I knew I was an alcoholic. I knew I had a drinking problem, but I was okay with having a drinking problem. I don't have kids. I picked my husband because he liked to drink and smoke. I mean, well, and for other things too. He's also a great person, um, but that it was very important to me to pick somebody. Oh, and also I forgot to mention, from childhood, being an atheist. Like there was never any. I grew up in a town where it was, three quarters Roman Catholic and then one quarter Jewish, and everybody was religious, and all of my friends were religious, and I always felt very other, and just again, like I didn't understand why everyone else seemed to think that stuff was real and meaningful, but to me it just felt like stories, and I just never bought into it. But so I also picked my husband for his atheism. So he was an atheist who drank and smoked, and I was like, we're a match made in heaven. But so we don't have kids. And so I think when my alcoholism was at its worst, I was kind of like, yeah, I'm a big drinker. So what? I'm successful. I have a job. I'm a professor. Um, I did treat my students like shit. I owed amends to several of my former grad students who I belittled people. I was awful to people. But anyway, so by the time I came to AA, it was shortly after, well, okay, it was a couple of years after 2016, and I won't get political, but something happened in 2016 that traumatized me. And a couple of years after that, I just was so depressed and drinking so much all the time that I just finally decided to try a therapist again. I've been in and out of therapy since I was in fifth grade, but it had been a few years. So I went back to a therapist and I went to her for about 3 months before she ever asked me about drinking. At first, she thought I was on the spectrum. I was like, maybe, I don't know, sure, I'll try that. Then she thought I had PTSD. Then after 3 months, she was like, tell me about your drinking. And I was like, oh my God, I drink too much. I know I have a drinking problem. I told her how much I drank. Um, and I was like, you know what? But I don't care. I'm fine with it. I don't have kids. I'm not going to ruin anyone's life. And so by the end of that session, she had diagnosed me as a moderate alcoholic, a moderately serious alcoholic. And I was like, well, she said I was level 2. And I was like, well, how many levels are there? And she said, there's 3. And so I was like, well, what happens at level 3? And she was like, you lose your job, you kill somebody, you end up in jail. So I was like, okay, shit, that's not good. Um, and on the way home and she said she thought I should stop and I should join AA. And on the way home from therapy that day, I bought a pack of cigarettes and I sat on the back porch smoking, chain smoking until my husband got home. And I was like, my therapist thinks I'm an alcoholic. What do you think? And he was like, I think you really enjoy drinking, but I don't know. And to this day, he still hasn't, I don't know. I don't need his validation at this point, but like he was slow to come on board with it. I was too, though, to be honest. I wasn't quite sure, but I thought, I'm just going to give it a chance. I just felt like I was at the end of my rope. I didn't know what else to do. And I wasn't on the spectrum and I didn't have PTSD. So her first 2 diagnoses were not, did not take. And I was like, I'll try this one. So she sent me to this, or she suggested I go to this. Okay, well, okay, I forgot. I stopped drinking it was a month before I went to my first AA meeting. I was terrified to go to AA. I was so full of shame. And my therapist recommended a meeting in my city. And I went, and it wasn't my people. It was women. I've mostly gone to women's meetings, but it was upper middle class women who had little handbags and I don't know, wore pastel suits, and they just were of a different, I don't know. I don't know. They just seemed very put together and again of a different socioeconomic status than me. So I felt out of place. And also always a lot of God talk. And I did AA for 5 years before I found this group. So I was fine with I wasn't completely fine with the gossip. I always was good at finding what I needed to get from the program. And so at first I hated the meetings. And I just made, I'm a rule follower. I just kept going. I just did what people told me to do. My therapist told me to pick somebody whose vibe I liked and ask them to sponsor me. So I picked somebody whose vibe I liked and I asked her to sponsor me. It turned out she was not a good fit for me. I picked wrong. I picked someone who reminded me of my mother. This woman shamed me and made me feel like I wasn't doing it right. And I dumped her, which was great because it gave me practice setting boundaries. So this program, no one ever taught me how to be a person. This program taught me how to be a human being. And I could tolerate the God stuff because I was like, I don't need to have a God. I just need to know that I don't have control over this. I just need to be able to believe that I have a problem that is beyond my own ability to handle. And so I my first 4 years were great. I didn't have a major depression my first 4 years, and I thought the program had cured that. And then in my fifth year, I did start to get depressed again. And that sucked because I was like, I got really mad at the program. I felt betrayed. But it wasn't the program's fault. It was naive of me to think that a lifetime of major depression would be cured by this. I think what this gave me was a set of principles by which to live my life so that I could feel like I was doing what was morally and ethically and interpersonally appropriate and kind and honest. And when I get depressed now, because I have gotten depressed, I mean, again, my fifth year was kind of sucky. Um, the past few months haven't been great. I lost a really dear friend to suicide over a month ago. And like, I don't know, my heart is broken all the time about what's happening in my country. Why the reason I found this group is because um in 2024 when another terrible thing happened. Um, Not getting political, but oh, it hurt my heart so badly. And I had to leave my home group because I had never really felt like those women were my people. I was grateful to them for the gifts they gave me, and I shared with them every week. But I didn't trust them. Ultimately, um, after the most recent election, I just didn't feel safe in Florida anymore. I just felt like I don't even trust anyone in this state. I've gotten over that, but I looked online for secular AA meetings. I was like, God damn it, this time I'm just gonna only be surrounded by people um who have at least that thing in common with me. Um, and so I joined this group and I love this group. I very much appreciate the WhatsApp chain. Sometimes I think of that WhatsApp text chain for an all night place as my higher power. It's like a constant ongoing stream of kindness and support. I very rarely say anything, but sometimes I'll heart things because it's just like a little river of kindness and support. And it's like, that's the universe putting positive energy into the world. And so uh, this program and this group, um, yeah, have so when I've been hit with bouts of depression, and they've been bad. I had a really bad one this past summer. I This program doesn't cure my depression, but I can apply the principles to my depression, and I can accept that I can't control the way I was born or the way I was raised or the way I feel. And then I can just be, it's okay. These are just feelings. They're not me. Sometimes they last for a really long time and it sucks, but I know that they always go away eventually. Um, and that, mental illness is, it's a challenge just like alcoholism, just like I've met people in the rooms who have had so many worse challenges than mine. So also my victim mentality, which is one of my terrible, terrible traits that it's hard for me to get rid of. Um, this program helps me get over that because I really, really, until I entered this program, I fully believed that it was right and appropriate to think of myself as a victim. Like I just was like, it's objectively true that I am a victim because my life sucks. And that's how I walked around. And now I don't now I can push back against that because that's not how I feel anymore. I feel like everyone has shit. And I and the people in these rooms are honest about their shit in a way that people outside the rooms in my life aren't always. And so I love that I can come to the rooms and have honesty and people just kind of being, again, like kind and just having integrity. So I think that's about 30 minutes, if not more. But thank you. Thank you. That felt very, that felt like a lot. So I will end my share. Thank you very much.